you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see everyone on the call here, and we are so very happy to present to you the finale for the 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women Project. Our season 2 of the Fireside Chat, Volunteerism. I'm really looking forward to hearing the conversation this afternoon, but just want to say a welcome once again to everyone. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank all the women who were a part of this season's 2, sharing your time, your brilliance, your advice. And I really encourage everyone to check out the prior sessions that are posted on our 100 ABC Women YouTube channel. So again, thank you so much for being here, and I will turn it over to the next speaker. Oh, and in case you don't know who I am, I'm Denise O'Neill Green, one of the co-founders and co-authors of the 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women Project. I don't know why I always forget to mention my name, but there you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome. My name is Galila Mast, and I'm the Regional Manager of Black Community Business Development here at TD Bank. On behalf of TD, it is a pleasure to join all of you today. Since its inception, TD has been the primary supporter and contributor to 100 ABC Women. 100 ABC Women, thank you for all you do to help bring people together and drive progress for Black communities. TD is proud to support your efforts to advocate for change and to help build a more equitable and inclusive society. Thank you to all of our TD colleagues who have volunteered their time to support this project. I want to start by giving a big shout out to our TD folks, Shanna Kilburn, Lola Edene, who helped coordinate the collaboration and really to build meaningful and sustainable relationship. Opal Kelly, Sherry Sweeney, Crystal Van Westrup, Herbie, who all have volunteered to deliver on incredibly meaningful conversation. I also got a chance to really see firsthand the incredible effort behind the scenes as I moderated a conversation about topics that's near and dear to my heart. And it was about minding our financial business. This support is really made possible through the TD Ready commitment, the bank's corporate citizenship platform. We're leveraging the power of our people, business, and philanthropy. At TD, we believe that embracing change today can help create pathways to a more inclusive and equitable tomorrow. That is why TD is proud to support initiatives and programs across our footprint that help bring people together, amplify Black stories, voices, and celebrate the contribution and achievements of everyday change makers who are making a difference. We are continuing our effort both inside and outside the bank to help break down barriers to access and inclusion. The creation of customer focus segments such as my role is one of the ways we're looking to bring about tailored financial advice and elevated experience to help bring financial parities for Black communities across Canada. We know there's more work to do, and we're continuing and we're committed to learning more, celebrate and support the Black customers, colleagues, and communities we serve today and into the future. Special thank you to the Honorable Dr. Gina Agustin, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green for steering the 100 ABC Women ship, and to Don Jones Simmons, executive producer. We're confident you are making a difference to our communities. Once again, on behalf of TD, thank you to 100 ABC Women and to your teams for your dedicated efforts to ensure success of what you do, as it is important. Our collective progress in driving meaningful change for our society in large part is because of the effort of so many organizations, remarkable community organizations. We are proud to support you and to help you write tomorrow's history to inspire future generations. Thank you again.
Greetings, my name is Claudette Knight, and I'm Vice President, Workplace Design and Experience at CIBC. At CIBC, our purpose is to help bring our clients' ambitions to life. For our employees, we are committed to fostering an environment where everyone can achieve their full potential, and we are proud to be a bronze sponsor of the 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to share some remarks with you today. First, a hearty congratulations on the successful completion of Season 2 of the Fireside Chats. There have been so many interesting, educational, and thought-provoking topics this season. Congratulations to Donna Jones Simmons for your exceptional leadership and stewardship of the series, and also to the technical team and moderators. I also want to recognize some CIBC contributors. David Grimmond, who co-moderated Am I Ready to Retire? A pre-planning for retirement session. Also, Maxine Schroeder, who was a panelist on the topic of Challenges for Successful Diversification of the Canadian Workplace. And Harry A. Zainibe, who continues to strengthen the partnership between CIBC and 100 ABC Women, and being a driving force for making events like today happen. On a personal note, I want to say how thrilled I was to become an ABC Woman honoree in 2020. I wear my pin proudly, as you can see, and look forward to welcoming new honorees in the fall. Congratulations again, and enjoy the summer months.
Just to echo my co-author and founder, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, We are absolutely thrilled to have you, the audience, our special guests, moderators, panelists, technical support, Malcolm Edwards here, to be part of this conversation about volunteerism. This term is very familiar to our moderator, Sarah Onyango. I know this firsthand. She has volunteered her time for our book launching galas, symposiums, and fireside chats with all sincerity. I am keenly aware that she volunteers for many causes and activities for which she is very passionate. So I will now turn it over to super volunteer, Sarah.
Well, hello, everybody, and how thrilled I was when I was asked to moderate a topic that is very, very near and dear to my heart. Now, listen, before we get into the conversation, you need to hear some statistics. According to StatsCan, in 2018, over 24 million people volunteered, formally, informally, or both, accounting for 79% of Canadians aged 15 and older. But in January 2023, Volunteer Canada says up to 65% of organizations across the country are experiencing a shortage of volunteers. So how can we help reduce this shortage? Well, we're going to be talking to an all-star panel of super volunteers. I'm not a super volunteer. These are super volunteers. And they're going to be talking about volunteering their valuable time and the benefits and joys that they've seen. And just so you know who is on this panel, between them, we were just talking, they represent, let's say, over 2 centuries of volunteerism. Nadia Thompson is currently a scheduling clerk in palliative care. At the age of 12, she became a member of the Jamaican Association of Manitoba Dance Group. She took part in many events throughout the city, performing at Folklorama, Blokorama, schools, and senior homes. Welcome, Nadia. Next, we have what young people would call an OG of the volunteering sector. Kamala Jean Gopi, an educator, a community leader, a philanthropist, a very committed supporter of the arts, especially dance, theater, music, film, visual arts. She's a retired educator who for over 4 decades has volunteered and served on a number of boards, including the National Ballet of Canada, the Obsidian Theatre, Roy Thompson Hall, Massey Hall, the Governing Council of U of T, the United Way Toronto, et cetera, and she'll tell you more about that. Welcome, Kamala Jean Gopi. Next, we have Michelle James, who's an institutional executive. She is the Executive Vice President, People and Transformation at Scarborough Health Network, which is a large community hospital with close to 6,000 employees, around 800 doctors, and over 300 volunteers. She has held senior leadership roles at this hospital for almost 15 years. Welcome, Michelle. And then we have Elise Harding Davis, a historian and a Black Canadian heritage expert. She's a 7th generation African Canadian from Windsor, Ontario, and she spent 32 years as the curator administrator of the North American Black Historical Museum and Cultural Center, which is now known as the Amherstburg Freedom Museum, and the Nazaré African Methodist Episcopal Church National Historic Site. She led the restoration of the Nazaré African Methodist Episcopal Church and worked on its designation as a National Historic Site. And additionally, her advocacy work in preserving African Canadian cemeteries has resulted in heritage designations for several of these grave sites. Welcome, Elise. And then we have Dr. Karis Newton Thompson, no relation to the other Thompson on the panel. Educator, community leader. She has worked as an educator in Guyana, Jamaica, and Canada for over 30 years. She has served as a public school employee in Ontario for over 25 of those years. In Ontario, she was a teacher, department head consultant, principal, manager, and education officer. Welcome, Dr. Newton Thompson. So we're going to get right into it. I just want to know if there is any aspect of that biographical introduction where you would like to add one thing, one element that would enrich this discussion. We could start with Kamala Jean.
No, because I think in the course of the discussion, if there are other
It'll come out.
areas in which we have been involved, I think it will come out as part of the discussion.
Nadia?
And it will make more sense then than just in isolation.
Fair enough. Nadia?
I just want to say hello from sunny Winnipeg, Manitoba, as I'm not in Ontario, but we have a very high quality of volunteerism here. And I thank you for having us a part of this.
Elise?
Oh, I've been on quite a few boards, and one of my other passions is Black wellness and health. And I'll talk about that a little later as well, Sarah.
Great. Michelle?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I would just want to acknowledge some of the volunteer work that I've done in addition to my paid work, and acknowledge the organizations that have embraced me on their board of directors, including Durham College, where I also served as the chair, and the Seniors Care Network, Family Services Appeal, and United Way Appeal Region. So just want to acknowledge that work.
Great. Thank you very much. And Dr. Karis? Anything I should add?
Yes, I was just unmuting myself.
Yeah.
In addition to my academic and educational qualifications for which I got paid, I have been a volunteer for many decades, at least 4 decades. And so I just wanted to underline that as well.
And since you underlined that, we are going to hear more about your volunteer journey, how you started volunteering in the first place. And for the next, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, just hear from each of you. So we'll start with Dr. Karis.
Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to say that I come to this chat speaking as a community volunteer. I have volunteered in other areas, but as a Black community volunteer, that's where I want to be talking today. And I've also volunteered like in my places of employment and that sort of thing. So how did I get into volunteering? I think that I was subconsciously stimulated to be a volunteer from learning the history of my village, which is Buxton in Demerara, Guyana, and also observing my elders and others in my village. Learning the history of my village and keeping with the theme of women, one of the things that happened in my village after the abolition of slavery was my ancestors, who no longer wanted to work on the sugar plantation where they were enslaved, but bought an adjacent village, put their money together in a wheelbarrow and bought the village. And then there was this negotiation around taxes with the colonizers. And so it was unsatisfactory for my ancestors. And so they heard that the governor was going to be passing in a train to go along the east coast of Demerara. And so 6 pregnant women linked arms and stopped the train so that the governor could speak to them. So talking about volunteerism in a very dramatic way, they put their lives on the line and their children, their expected children on the line to get that audience with the governor because he was refusing to speak to our people. So in my village, that's a foundational volunteer type of sensibility that we have. So you will see people from Buxton, and there's a Buxton, Ontario, but Buxton, Guyana, all over the world, where they're sending stuff home, they're helping out with schooling, they're doing all that sort of thing. So that's the community in which I was raised. And so I just continue on. So when I got to not even high school age, if you're older than somebody else and they needed help with schoolwork, you help them with the schoolwork. And we had in our village, one of our elders started a high school, and the high school was there for people to go, but you didn't have to go to that high school to go after school to get lessons in what they call lessons place after school. So if I am in, say, well, going with the Canadian thing, if I'm in grade 10 and somebody's in grade 3 and they need help in math, I help them. And so we used to go there after school and everybody got help from each other, because we went along with that idea of each one teach one in the village. We have a lot of other things we do, but I'm just saying that's my foundational understanding of volunteerism, and it started at a very young age.
Thank you very much for that. And from Buxton, Guyana to Buxton, Ontario.
Ontario, yeah.
Elise, tell us how you got started.
Well, that's a very tangible connection. We lived with my grandmother in Windsor. I was born there until I was 12 years old. And a part of my passion being for medical issues is because my brother had sickle cell anemia. He had 3 different strains. He was very ill. And so my mother focused largely on my brother, leaving me to be with my grandmother. And I tagged along with her, and I went to see her friends, and we worked at the church. And I was saying earlier, I started volunteering at age 3, wrapping the cutlery into the napkins for the different dinners. And sometimes we'd have up to 200 people at the dinners. So it was a big job, and I had better do it correctly because my grandmother was very exacting. Where my brother was concerned, he couldn't go to school. So a tutor came to the home, and I would sit under the table and listen to the lessons, learned how to read and write by the time I was 3, until the tutor said I could no longer be in the room because my brother wasn't doing his lessons. I was volunteering, doing his math and reading to him. So, I think in Black families, volunteerism is inculcated in our systems. It's something that we lovingly and willingly do. And as time went along, I was in the Brownies, I was in the Girl Scouts. When I got into school at higher levels, I was on the debate team, so on and so forth. Always having in mind that you must have your voice heard or you don't exist. And
Amen.
That's what happened with the North American Black Historical Museum. I started as a volunteer there. The original founder of the museum, Max Simpson, and his wife were contacting Black men to help with their skills to build the museum. And I had known Max since I was a small child. I called him and asked, why aren't you asking women? And so I went to the museum. And when it opened in 1981, I was volunteering, got on the board of directors, became an assistant manager, took museums skills myself because it wasn't offered in post-secondary education at that time, and became the first female of color to be the curator of an accredited museum in Canada. And from then on, I started to be approached by different organizations to assist with their boards and to assist with their training. And the North American Black Historical Museum was the first museum to offer Black history to this country in a formal way. And then I helped to, in a volunteer position, put together the first exhibit at the Royal Ontario Museum in Ontario. Yeah. I'm very proud of the fact that my grandmother dragged me along.
Yeah.
That's
Amen.
how we do.
Amen. Amen. That is how we do. And yes, thank you so much for that. We're going to go over to Nadia.
Hi there.
How you got started?
How I got started, well, my parents migrated to Winnipeg in the 70s, and being part of a very small Caribbean community, I, along with my brother and sister, wanted to know more about our roots because we were the only ones who were first generation Canadians. And in doing so, with the influx of migration, there was a small Caribbean community that offered history and dance in our city. So that's where we started, and dancing at schools and festivals and personal care homes just got our community more involved and meeting other young people here in the city. Our teachers and our instructors were visionaries, and they've been volunteering, and that kind of encouraged us to do the same. When I got into the workforce, had my first child, there was a lot of people who volunteered to help me, and that made me want to help others. And I kind of went from there. So we have a great motivational group of women here in the city who encourages others, and I am privileged to be a part of that. I work currently with the Black History Manitoba. I'm the chairperson. I also help on the board of the Jamaican Association. I am a part of the Congress of Black Women, and obviously I give back to my church as well. So all of those things collaborate to make me who I am now, and all of those visionaries that have gone through my path as I continue to do it. I do it just because I enjoy it. I want others to do it as well, because it's an inner satisfaction rather than not necessarily always getting accolades for doing it. But that's basically how I got started.
That is amazing. That is really amazing. And actually, it's through your work with Black History Winnipeg that I met you in Ottawa for the for the national convention of
yeah, sometimes
Canadians.
we get forgotten here in Winnipeg, but we're here.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Great. We're going to come back to volunteering for heritage organizations, because that's a big thing right now. Kamala Jean Gopi, how did you get started?
Hi, everyone. I think that volunteerism, it starts with something that touches us personally. I was a teacher in North York, and 3 little Jamaican kids arrived in January of 1975. And I heard, teachers in the staff room, what they were saying about the children. That one didn't know her alphabet, and the secretary decided to change the children's name because 2 of them didn't have the same last name. And I learned that, and that I got riled up about it. So I said to one of the teachers, I was a librarian, send her down to me and I will help. And she came down, and in Jamaica Patois, I said, you know your alphabet, ma? You know your ABC? Yes, ma, no ABCD. Well, this child didn't understand the accent and didn't understand the word alphabet. And so I would help her. Well, that got me wondering, what's happening with immigrant children from the West Indies who come into our schools? How are they viewed? Where are they placed? What help are they getting? And that was what got me started. I then found out about the Jamaican Canadian Association, and from there went on to work in North York Board with children after school. I taught in, I was a librarian in a school that was in the southern tip of North York. And after school, 2 days a week, I would find myself up to Jane Junior High, Jane Finch Corridor, to help the children in junior high who had arrived and were behind for a variety of reasons. And so that's what got me to become a volunteer. So from that, then I joined JCA, became the first female president back in 1978. And that opened the doors for many other things that have happened in my life. But I think at the core, something touches you personally that you have a commitment to, in which you think you can help. And you just never know where that help will lead or what impact it will have. But by and large, I found that the various things that I've done, the various boards I've served on, whether in health, education, or the arts, invariably, I am enriched by that process of volunteering. You give, but you get so much more in return. That's intangible, but very, very important. So find something that to which you have a commitment and an interest, and go for it.
Thank you very much for that. And we're going to dive deeper into that a little later in the discussion. And I forgot to congratulate two of you are Order of Ontario recipients, Elise Harding Davis and Kamala Jean Gopi, in recognition to the impact, and we're going to talk more about that you've had in your respective areas. Last but not least at all, Michelle James, how did you get started in your volunteer journey?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, Kara's talked about her parents and sort of the impact of the community that she was born and raised in. And I have a similar story. We came to Canada from Barbados in 1967 when I was 5. And as all new immigrants, especially in the 60s, it was tough. You know, I had issues at school. I started in kindergarten, so there was no grade to put me back to, or I'm sure that would have happened. But my parents would have struggled with employment, with landlords, with neighbors, with so many things. And yet they both found time to volunteer in the community. So it was always something that I was used to, that when there's a need, you put up your hand. And I recall as I went through school, volunteering for the yearbook committee, or to read the announcements on the PA system, or at church to, you know, I remember folding the palms to give out on Palm Sunday, any little thing. And but I think when I really began to take volunteering seriously was when I got to university. I went to the University of Toronto, and this is why what Kamala said rings so true for me, where something that really touches you deeply. And what I noticed in my early years at the University of Toronto was so many of the classes I was in, I just was not seeing a lot of Black faces and people that looked like me. I was studying sciences at the time. I ended up doing a Bachelor of Science with a specialty in human biology, and I didn't see a lot of Black students in my class. Thankfully, we had the African and Caribbean Students Association of U of T, which is where we all came together at 44 St. George Street, and you know, we really supported each other. So what I did was I said, why is this happening? Because I knew about my experiences with racism in school, with streaming, with so many things. And I just decided to do something about it. So with a few of my friends, we actually approached the Toronto Board of Education. This was 1983. And on my mother's old brother typewriter, I actually typed up a proposal to go into middle schools in the city of Toronto, get the Black students out of class, to come and meet with a group of Black students from the University of Toronto who would speak to them and inspire and encourage them to continue with post-secondary education. The proposal was accepted, and we implemented that program, and it existed for several years at the University of Toronto. And when we later on in the discussion, I'd love to talk about how impactful that was in terms of other aspects of my life and my career development. But that was probably the first thing. We came up with the innovative name, the youth program. That was as creative as we got, but the volunteering for that youth program while studying, and I probably had at least 2 or 3 part-time jobs as well, was probably my really first serious effort at volunteering.
Thank you so much for that. And you those of you who've had leadership positions in volunteer organizations, you've had to I guess supervise other volunteers, give direction to other volunteers. I would like to find out from you the challenges, you know, of leading other volunteers when you know that it's voluntary and it's their time and that sort of thing. And we're going to start with Michelle, because you do that in your professional life as well as outside of it.
Right, yes, at the hospital, the volunteer services department is one of the ones in my portfolio, and we take it very seriously. You know, and depending on where you want to volunteer, some organizations have more resources to support volunteers, but volunteers, although they're not getting paid, their role is very serious and impactful. So in our environment, we have a robust recruitment program. We have orientation. Our volunteers have to be trained. They have to have exposure to our policies, and we coach them and give them feedback all along the way so that they know how well they're doing, where there's opportunities to improve, just as we would with an employee. And of course, now this was all amplified during COVID, but safety of the volunteers is, you talked about how we're seeing post-pandemic that there are shortages of volunteers. And we certainly saw that. And one of the reasons was, of course, in our environment, people didn't feel entirely safe coming back to work in the hospital. Which we completely understand, because many of our volunteers are elderly, they're retired, and they are at significant risk if they, from a safety perspective. So safety is really important, but also the recipients of service and care. People are also more cautious about who they are interacting with, depending on, what the volunteer role is. So I could definitely relate to that, the shortage of volunteers that we're seeing. But I think it's really important that organizations, to the extent that they can, support and nurture the volunteers so that they can be successful.
Kamala Jean, you've been a leader of several volunteer organizations during your volunteer career. Tell us about what the challenges are, what it's like to lead other volunteers.
Well, I think it's important to have a one-on-one when somebody joins the board or joins the group, to say to them, what do you expect to give or get in this undertaking? And how long are you committed for? And to make sure as much as possible that the tasks that they get fit with their skills and their interests. Because if you don't, then people just leave. And I wanted to make sure in many of the organizations where I worked, that we didn't have people just coming to use it as a way of stacking their resume. So we'd be on boards and say, if you don't pair or don't do your assignments in 3 consecutive meetings, then clearly you're too busy for us. And we might need you to have quorum. And if you're not there, the whole business of the organization might suffer. So think about it very carefully, so that you want to give because you see the value in giving. So those, and I've been certainly the Urban Alliance on Race Relations or the Jamaican Canadian community organizations, where, I've had to say, I don't think that you are ready or you have the time to do what's required. And some people didn't like that, but the rest of us are putting in 110%. We can't pull along somebody who's only doing 10% and the work doesn't get done. So the important undertaking was to get the work done. And I'll say, Minnie, come back in another year's time when you think you have more time. The thing that I do when I get asked to sit on boards, I say, well, I'm busy right now. The same thing I do with my giving. Call me 2 years, 3 years from now, because I rotate. And therefore, when I get off one board, then I go someplace else where I can make a contribution. When I finish a pledge to one organization, then I can do the other. So that you have to manage your own time. And in doing that, then you're able to help other people to manage their own time and to say, are you ready for this? Do you know what this requires? Because some of the boards that I sit on, it's not just your time and your energy, it's your money. You don't sit on the National Ballet for nothing. You don't sit on United Way for nothing. You don't sit on St. Michael's Hospital for nothing. There's this expectation that you're going to give. And so when people come on boards that I've been involved with, we have a little discussion, why did you do this? What do you think? How much time do you have? and maybe you're not quite ready. Come back in another year's time.
Yeah.
You have to be upfront. You know, this is not a game. This
Yeah.
is serious work.
Yes, thanks for that. Thank you very much for that. I like that you are highlighting the fact that even though it's volunteer work, you have to come at it in a professional manner,
For sure.
in a serious manner. Just because it's not in a workplace like where Michelle is, doesn't mean you should take it any less seriously. Very good. And I saw Elise Harding Davis nodding, and you are in the museum business, in the heritage business. So tell us about leadership of volunteers in that
Well, you know,
setting.
underlying volunteerism is service. We are serving our community. We're serving the greater community. At the North American Black Historical Museum, I developed policy and procedure. It is serious business, as Kamala said. It isn't just casual. It's very structured. It needs to be very structured. And those of us who started volunteering early begin to learn that this can get you into business situations. Volunteerism can be very rich in how you conduct yourself, how you present what you are dealing with, having very, very focused ideas about what it is you're trying to present. And with African Canadian history, African origin history overall, it has been so overlooked and so denigrated. It was my passion and my determination to make it on a par with all other histories. Without Black history, history is incomplete. So the Black thread in the Canadian tapestry is woven into all of Canadiana. And that's how I went about putting that word out. I've written editorials, I've written books, I have volunteered on other organizations as the Black spokesperson, not as a token, as the Black spokesperson, to give the fact that regardless of where we come from in the diaspora, when we are in Canada, our Canadianism is as invaluable and important as all other histories. And without that history, we don't know where we've come from. Being a 7th generation African Canadian, my family have been in Canada since 1798. They fought in all the major confrontations. They've contributed in every way you can possibly think of. My late sister, Shelley Harding Smith, was Canada's first Black female master electrical contractor. These are huge, huge contributions, and not to be overlooked and not to be slighted. I myself try to keep a humble stance and be delicate in my presentations. But that doesn't mean that I can't be forceful, and it doesn't mean that I won't be forceful. I've taught African Canadian studies at St. Clair College since 1993. And that is volunteerism in itself, because you put together the program, you convince people that this is what needs to be done, you change your word methodology from fugitives to refugees, so on and so forth. It's an entire microcosm of the rest of the world.
So Elise, you impart all of this to incoming volunteers. Kamala says she actually conducts interviews to find out the suitability. So do you do the same thing?
Definitely do have interviews. We have manuals that shows them how to conduct themselves at the front counter, how to put together a tour. They can be, get their own personality into it, but there is a methodology. It isn't just whatever you choose to do whenever you choose to come. There's a schedule, and all of these things, as I said, help young people, the ones that I've largely worked with, thousands of young people from Canada, the United States, India, Africa, as volunteers in our museum to become functioning members of society.
Thanks for that, Elise. And since you mentioned young people, we're going to Nadia. We'll go to Winnipeg and talk about leading young volunteers, the challenges and opportunities.
Yeah. It is a challenge. And I think as growing up, as starting as a young person in my teens, the different reality of the environment now than it was back then makes a significant difference. And that's possibly why we have more challenges now, encouraging young people to be involved in volunteerism, because there are more challenges within education, within the employment field, social media, all of these different distractions and obstacles that make it just a little bit less of a motivation to want to give back to your community. But we from our standpoint have been trying to use different avenues in order to encourage them to want to volunteer, whether we're going down to the musics and going to different avenues that they are more involved in order to say, hey, you know what, there's a way that you can learn history by rap music or by social media advocacy, promoting different arts and entertainment and food. A lot of those things encourage people to want to take their passions and put it back into the community through volunteer work. So it is a challenge. It's a challenge that we've accepted here in Manitoba because we think it's really important. We are growing with the government officials and with the city itself and the province. So we have to keep that motivation going. And our community volunteers who've been doing it for so long are getting older. And we don't want them to feel that their work is not being continued on. So that's where we stand. And I think that's the best way I can put it. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for that, because it's true that social media and all the quote unquote alternative ways to engage with the world have made it less motivating for some young people. Although there was the whole George Floyd thing, and there was a little bit of an uptick. We're going to get back to that later on. Dr. Karras, leading other volunteers,
Yes.
the challenges and opportunities.
Okay, so generally in the community, when there's a need for volunteers, people tend to just, jump in there and help out as much as they can and so on. I have had different experiences leading volunteers. Like, for example, with the Congress of Black Women Toronto chapter, I was the president when we built a co-op at in Etobicoke and also made a film, an anti-racism film. And I couldn't ask for more dedicated volunteers in those areas. We used to have to go to meetings almost every single night, for the co-op. We had to meet with the lawyers and meet with the developers and all of that and so on. And some of us had to go and do presentations because it was a co-op that was initiated by Black women, and then we joined with a coalition of visible minority women. But in the community we were going to go, somehow they thought, I don't know what they thought we would be. So we had to go and make presentations. You know how it is in certain areas in the city, they think if Black people are coming, something is going to go wrong. So we had to make presentations, and people would prepare and do the presentations. And I mean, I couldn't ask. And with the film, we had a committee working on that film, and of course we paid the filmmakers and so on, but the volunteers were the ones who were supervising everything and so on. And I can't complain about that. And at the Ontario Black History Society, when I became president there, we had to, we were in a financial situation, let's say. So I had to go down every single day after work because we couldn't afford the staff. And we reached out to UFT. I used to be a member of the Black Student Union at the time when I went through, but when Michelle went through, I think it was the Caribbean Students Association. So I'm not sure what was there then, but we reached out to them to get students to volunteer to do presentations for the society so that we can earn some money. Because every time they go to a school and did a presentation, we got paid for that. And that was largely successful as well. We did have a few hiccups where, you know, presenters, they might go late or something. So we had to work on that part of it. But generally, you know, these were young people, undergraduates, and they would come out and they would do, you know, really earnestly do the presentations and so on. But of course, we trained them on the presentations, and so they were able to get those facilitation skills as they were doing this work as well. I had also commissioned someone to do a Black history tour of Toronto. And so we had to have people who would step on a bus and go around and do the tours. And so, you know, I drive them around in my car and show them the sites, and we would go through the script and so on. And again, we had, you know, we paid some students and we had some volunteers, and they did a great job. But we did have some more major challenges with some folks, like someone who didn't turn up for a bus tour, you know, because they went somewhere else because it was Caravana time, or, you know, that sort of thing. So we always had, you know, some challenges like that we had to work with. Paola mentioned people wanting to stack their resume. I was in favor of that because I thought, if you want to stack your resume, come, we'll train you, you'll go do things, you'll make sure you're excellent so that we can give you a good recommendation. So I thought it was a win-win for the organization. So I didn't mind if people, you know, that may not be their stated interest, but if they came and did that. But I mean, generally, I would say that we had really good experiences, but we did have some challenges with people being on time and that sort of thing. And it tended to be the younger youth, you know, maybe they'd never had a job before. And so the volunteering is a way to get them into the labor market, but they still sleep in late. So somebody has to wake them up and whatnot. So we had to work with that and let them know the seriousness. When you commit, you have to be there on time and so on. And we gave them chances, and some of them we had to say goodbye to because, you know, you give them chances and then after it came, you know, you had to say bye because it was compromising the organization.
Right. Well, thank you all for answering that particular question about leadership, volunteer leadership of other volunteers in your organizations, making sure that they're there for the right reason, that they are motivated, that they do have a certain amount of discipline and take what you're trying to do with the organization seriously, and that they have really pride in what they're doing and that they're being treated with, you know, respect, etc. So you all are very busy. At one point, some of you who are now retired, you actually had a job, you had a family, etc., and you were volunteering. Nadia, you are still working, and Michelle's still working, and you're volunteering. How do you balance? Because that's, everybody asks me, you're at the radio station, you're at the TV station, you're at United Way, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing that. Do you sleep? And do you have a life? Personally, I don't, but
You do.
well, my life is all of this, but it's not about me. How do you balance?
I think the
Volunteer
best-
life balance.
Yeah.
Nadia.
Yeah. It's about you as a person, how you manage your time, where you put your time, because like there's a lot of things I could be doing, but I've chosen to do my volunteer work. I work full-time, I work part-time. I am a single mom, and it's been beneficial in parenting as well to lead by example. So for my daughter, now she's grown, So it's easier for me to volunteer my time. But a lot of those things like Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that does not interest me. So I am able to take that time and put it somewhere else. When I talk to young people, I encourage them to even say, if you calculate the time that you're on social media or you're watching TV or you're whatever extracurricular activity that you've found yourself, if you take even one of those hours away in a day and save it up and take that 5 hours on a Saturday and give back to your community, it makes a huge difference. And little things like that can be beneficial to you as a person, and also to your community, because your community is relying on people like you to help them move forward. So it's all about and I will honestly say volunteering is not for everybody. Miss Kamla and Miss Elise had mentioned those things. Like sometimes it's just not for you. And I say that very, very wholeheartily, that sometimes it is just not something that is for everybody. So as much as we want to encourage everybody to do it, we also have to acknowledge as a community that it's just not for everybody.
Thank you very much for that. And since she mentioned you, Elise, how have you balanced?
Well, let me tell you, ladies, I raised 3 daughters. I was the curator administrator at the museum. I was an executive assistant at Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital, and I ran the office of a member of parliament, all at the same time. And I was on automatic. I knew where I needed to be. I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I compartmentalized and I did it because as a child, I was raised to start and finish whatever I took on. And all of these areas that I was working in dealt with history. At the museum, it was history overall. At the hospital, part of my portfolio was diversity and bringing in volunteers, working with having either African Canadians or other minorities give surveys to people, not just our Caucasian brothers and sisters. You can't get a proper answer if you don't ask the proper person. And with the member of parliament, I stood in for him in our community, went to events, brought students in to show them how parliament ran. My love is my children. I took my girls to the museum with me. They learned how to do exhibiting when they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. When they were in university at George Brown and at the University of Toronto, they worked for the Ontario Black History Society. You have a responsibility. To whom much has been given, much is expected. Simply do that. It's easier than getting into trouble. I explained that to a lot of the youth who came through the museum, whether they were working for us or they were volunteering. I had a group of old ladies, about 8 women, some up into their 90s, who would come to the museum just to dust the exhibit cases, to volunteer in that manner, because they were so proud of having such a facility. And they treated me so well, I couldn't let them down. I still am on several different boards. I'm on the Alliance of Healthier Communities, about 120 health clinics throughout Ontario, dealing with minority health and well-being. I'm the chair of the Harrow Health Center. Yesterday, we had a patient volunteer meeting, and we served hot dogs afterward. And I mean, I helped serve. I ate one and I had an allergic reaction.
So Elise,
yes,
not to interrupt, but so basically what you're saying is you just compartmentalize everything, and you've actually involved your family members so
That
that
is
they
correct.
don't feel cheated of your absence. Michelle, what about you? How have you balanced volunteer work and professional life and
Yeah.
other commitments?
Yeah, much like what the others have said, you have to really take it seriously. And you get asked the same questions about work-life balance in relation to family and your job. So once you've made that commitment, you have to make time for it. Like you make time for exercise, or you make time for worship or prayer. It's just one of those things, if it's important to you, that you find a way. And they have that saying, if you want something done, give the job to a busy person. And there's lots of, I think, evidence to support that. But the other thing too, and Nadia alluded to this, is if you can't do it, be real, be honest. You don't have to say yes to everything, every volunteer opportunity that comes along, because it's not fair to the people that you're trying to help. You know, when I sit on boards, there's often a policy that says if you miss 3 consecutive board meetings, you'll be asked to reassess whether this is the right place for you. And I see in the hospital, when we have assigned a volunteer to do something, whether it's to support the information desk, to greet people that are coming into the emergency department or surgery, if they don't show up, quality of care and the patient experience will suffer. So I think if you have to be honest with yourself. If you can't make the commitment, then just let somebody else take that opportunity.
Yeah. And in the next round, we're going to talk about a volunteer opportunity you turned down, right? But before we get to that, Kamala Jean, how you achieve that balance with your volunteer commitments, family, personal commitments.
Well, first you prioritize, okay, what's important to you. And then once you prioritize, you look at your time. And as you said, you say no to certain things. And now what I would do when I say, look, come back to me in 2 years' time. When I'm finished on this board, then I will take this on. But I don't have time for that now, because you also have your own personal integrity. My name is very valuable. And so therefore, if I take on a task, it has to be done in the way that would make me feel proud that I was involved and I did my fair share. I don't want it to fall down on my watch, and so therefore you prioritize, how much you can take, what you can take on, and you don't stretch yourself so thin that you are at your wit's end. That doesn't help you or anybody else. So to me, the important thing, what really interests you, where you think you can make the most impact or difference at the time. And therefore then you say, you put things off, you say, no, I can't do it now. The other thing that I think is very important, that when you're ready to leave, you make sure you open the door for somebody else.
Yes.
Right? Because often people get on boards and when they leave, that door closes behind them. That's crazy. Any board that I've been on, I make sure that there are others. I'll just tell you a little story. How I got on the board of Roy Thompson Hall. I got a call from Lincoln Alexander, and he said to me, send me your resumes. What you want it for? 2-3 months went by, and he finally says, I need to come see you. And he says, look, I'm leaving Roy Thompson Hall board, and I want to make sure that that space does not disappear. So he and the president of the board came to see me. We sat down and talked about it, so that he was leaving and he felt it was important that that spot should not disappear into the ether. And so whenever I'm on boards, I always give other persons' names, tell the organization about others who are able to fill that spot, so that when I leave, the door doesn't close behind me. The work continues and the representation continues.
And thank you so much for doing that. That's what you call being in the change-making business, by being consistent and making sure there is succession planning, which is another challenge that we have in volunteer-run organizations. And finally, Dr. Karras, the balance.
Yes, I think I would look at the balance over time, because when I was younger, like before I when I got trained as a teacher and there weren't any jobs in Ontario. I used to spend a lot of time volunteering. Dr. Hill had just started the Ontario Black History Society, and I was
Dr. Daniel Hill?
Yes.
Daniel G. Hill, yes.
Right, that the very one. Sorry. And I was so excited because I'd done history as my major at university. And so I couldn't get a job and whatnot. So I went back and did my master's, and I used to get Fridays off, and I would go down to the office. It wasn't where it is now. And I used to spend Friday, I don't care what they give me to do. I would lick envelopes, do whatever, run errands. I just went down there on Fridays and I did that. And so, I incorporated it into my study schedule and everything. And I don't think we could get jobs at that time too. There weren't any jobs available. So I was basically going back to school and volunteering at the Black History Society and the Congress of Black Women and the Canadian Alliance of Black Educators. So I used to just divide my time among the organizations and do whatever needed to be done. And so that went on, while I was single and unemployed. And when I became employed, I continued. And, of course, when you volunteer with an organization for a number of years, like 10 years or something, next thing you know, you're getting on the board and, like people are nominating you for the board. And my biggest surprise was to become the president of the Ontario Black History Society, because I was just doing programming, and then I got on the board, and then next thing you know, I'm vice president, and then I'm president. But it wasn't like I had this ambition to run the organization. It just sort of worked out that way. But again, I incorporated it into my schedule. But then I was going to get a promotion, and I realized I couldn't carry, all of this, because by then I was president of like 3 organizations in the same time. And so I gave notice to say, look, I'm going to have to step down from presidency. I still be a volunteer. And so I gave them like about a year's notice so that they will know, well, I'm not going to be holding that role anymore. And they needed to look for someone else to fill the spot. But volunteering has been a part of my life from since, as I mentioned. So even now, I've been retired for over 10 years. I still volunteer. And what I do is to organize it within my personal, like it's part of my schedule of my life. So, there are certain days when I don't do volunteer work before a certain time or whatever, like I have it organized, but it's just incorporated into my day-to-day because that's who I am.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And some of the people viewing online are agreeing with all of you about prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. And you're saying incorporate it into your schedule wherever it fits comfortably for you. And who is it who said, feel free to say, I can't do this anymore, when it starts to feel like a strain on your personal life and you can't be 100% in your volunteer tasks. So a lot of you talked about when you had to step down from something because really you just had too many commitments. But what about when a volunteer opportunity that is presented to you, it's just not what you want to be doing? How do you go about that? I know Kamala already says, she says, well, not right now, but maybe in 2 years, etc. But Kamala Jean, are there any instances where you just said, no, not at all, hard no, ever?
Initially, but I began to think, well, maybe the skills that I have or the experience that I have, that organization or that board recognizes that there's a gap. And so often, and those are the times in which I will say, well, I'm busy right now. And as someone said, have you considered this person or that person or that person? Because often in the mainstream organizations, I got to sit on the board of United because Martha Torrey came to see me and said, we would like you on the board. And I ended up being a vice president of United Way Toronto. And she came into my office. And at that time, I was working full-time at Immigration and Refugee Board. And they had strict conditions under which one could volunteer. We had to send the annual report for the United Way to Ottawa. I had to assure them that I was not going to interact with community organizations that delivered immigration and refugee services. And they had to go through all of those. And so initially I said, no, I couldn't do it because I understood that my job was going to interfere and cause conflict or perceptions of conflict of interest. And Martha Torrey came to see me. We sat, we had a big discussion, sent them information to Ottawa. They had to go through all of that to verify that there wasn't going to be a conflict. So sometimes there are other situations outside your sphere of activity that interfere or with the work or are seen as not suitable. So at first I said no, but when the federal government said, fine, it's okay, you're clear that you know what the boundaries are, where it is that you can go and what you can do. And so, as I said, ended up being in United Way for 7 years, the last 3 years, along with John Hondrick as the vice chair of United Way. And it was important to be there because there were, there's certain perceptions and experiences and understanding that you bring to the board. I currently sit on Unity Health, which is the largest Catholic hospital, in the country, St. Mike, St. Joseph's, and Providence. And I know that while most of the people on the board are doctors or lawyers or accountants or bank presidents and all of those kinds of things, what I bring to it is a community perspective, an immigrant's perspective, a minority perspective, women's perspective. And I'm filling a gap that they can't do otherwise, and you have to think of measuring. And so if I can't do, then I recommend persons, or I say, come back in another 2 years. And also I prepare myself so that when I get to that board, the contribution that you're going to make, no other person was going to cover off on all those, the vacuums, which exist. And I say to them, look, when I come to your board, I'm value added, whether it's because I'm a woman, I'm a minority, and I'm an immigrant, I'm value added. And so that's how we have to look at it. And you make those decisions in a very honest and truthful way to your own personal integrity. If I can't do it, then I can't do it. I get somebody else.
You know what? Thank you so much for that, because the integrity word really comes up a lot in a lot of our organizations. And absolutely, if it doesn't fit with your value system, if you can't, in all fairness, do a good job of that position, you just say no. Nadia, are there any instances where you would say, nah, not doing that?
Yes. Yes. Prior to, now I'm more open. Before anything to do with public speaking, I was a hard no. It was a no. And I got better and better at it once being voluntold, as we talked about earlier, though that word. But for right now, I know myself, and I echo Ms. Kamla, that there are certain things that I know for my own self that I will not be good at. So somebody had a question regarding political campaigns and stuff like that. I am not a political person. So I've been asked multiple times to volunteer in that capacity, and it's a hard pass for me. But there's also been times when it's just, I'm not necessarily a salesperson either. So if I'm having to sell something that I don't believe in, it's going to be a no for me as well. I've said, I know a lot of people volunteer with places like United Way. And the reason why I say no to United Way is because I believe that they have this high volume of volunteers, and they've got the high visualization. Everybody knows who United Way is. So I find that I have segued away from them because there's some grassroots organizations that need my help more. And that's why I've said no to them and said yes to others.
Thank you very, very much for that. And I can really relate to the volunteering for political campaigns. Those of us in the media cannot. So if you're in volunteering in community media, you cannot be seen in anybody's political campaign, no matter how much you like the person. Yes. Michelle, when do you say no to volunteering?
Right. I think when you're going to be effective at volunteering, three things have to align. One is the time or your availability. Second is the skill set. And third is what's been talked about, authentic values have to align. And I think if you're missing in one of those three, then you probably should consider saying no. And in fact, time is probably the easiest one. If you don't have enough time, you can make time because you can give up something else in order to free up time to volunteer if you really want to do it, because from a values or a skills perspective. But I think that if you don't have those three things align, the time and availability, the skill set, and the values, that those are probably conditions on which you should consider saying no and letting someone else take that opportunity.
Dr. Karras?
I agree with what most people said around why you refuse to do things. I have been asked to be on a board. Let me see how a board that has to do with medical issues and so on. And I was interested because it was in the community, and I went out to observe some board meetings and so on. Then I realized this is not how I want to spend my time. And so, I turned it down. And then, like right now, I'm being courted to be on, and I don't want to say the name of the organization, but it's very structured. They have a very structured way of going about things and so on. And there's no deviation from the structure. And I had visited one some time ago, and I raised my eyebrows and rolled my eyes when I went. And so I was asked, recently to join one that is more community-based, but I still, in my mind, I don't know what I would give up for that, because the structure and so on just do not appeal to me in the way it is. And I don't see the room for community advocacy or the kinds of things I like to do, so I haven't given a no, but I'm still wondering whether, in my old age, I should look at something like that. So, so that's where I am. There are definite things that I want to do, and, they fit with my own perspective and the way I see the world, my worldview. And then there are other things that I think, if I give up some time here, is it worth it going there? No. So I stay where I am or do similar things.
Elise?
Yes, I was courted by a board from one of the auto industry companies. And I did not feel that I could genuinely sit on a board of that type, but I did offer myself as a resource, going on the fact that Elijah McCoy's graphite lubricating cup was changed to be used in the auto industry. So I would give them that portion of myself, but I couldn't see myself being on that board because, truthfully, it took away from the boards and the activities that I wanted to do. My passion is focused on Black history, and that's my criteria. And if it doesn't fit that criteria, then Elise isn't going to be doing it, because as Kamala said, I only have my name and my reputation. And if I go into something that is just for the use of, so to speak, that's letting myself down and letting my whole community down.
Thank you very much for that. I'm totally with you on that. As a volunteer spokesperson for Black History Ottawa, I cannot be seen to be supporting or volunteering for organizations that are not supportive of
Right.
our Black community. And I'm very upfront with that right away,
Me too.
you know. So thank you, all of you, for that very clear response. And so this brings up the topic of that I get asked as a volunteer, sorry, with United Way, Nadia, here in Ottawa. Why do we not have more Black volunteers in these mainstream organizations that rely on volunteers? This time, I want anyone can start.
Sure. Sarah, I'd like to say that sometimes people in our community don't think they're wanted on some of these higher profile boards, and so they don't put themselves out. I would encourage them to do so. That's what I did. Of course, I'm from a smaller community, so you can get to be a big fish sooner, so to speak. But also, when you have seen someone in a role on a board, don't deny yourself the opportunity to apply there also, because there can be more than one.
Yeah. Kamala Jean?
Well, I think sometimes these large organizations don't have any connections or network that reach into our community. You know, you invite the people, you know, the old boys network, you know, who went to your school, who joins your golf club and all of these kinds of things. And many of us are not in those circles. And as a result, their circle is limited in reaching out. I was on one board where, you know, it was sense that their funding was going to be cut because they were asked how representative is their board. Well, as it saw, this is a group in which I was already doing it was in theater, and I was already a donor and a subscriber and a volunteer. So I was asked because somebody else who knew of me suggested I get on the board. Well, when I went on the board, I was one of 15. That board today has 6 minorities on that board because you open the doors for others to get in. And so I think that the people sometimes don't have the connections. And so this is why if you happen to be on a board, you don't close the door. You open it for others. You give them lists of names of people who can get, because sometimes quite clearly in their circle, they don't know us.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
you have to be the advocate. You have to be the door opener, not the door closer. You're not going to be the queen bee that you're there. And it's wonderful that, I mean, and I've met some wonderful people who've supported projects that I have, you know, but you have to, your job goes beyond your volunteering. It's almost a legacy issue. You
Yes.
want to make sure that when you leave, the role that you played doesn't disappear into the ether.
Thank you so much, Nadia.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that for me, myself, that may not be the direction that works for me, but there are definitely opportunities for others who are looking at those kind of what United Way, for example, stands for.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way.
No.
I was just, it was just funny.
I know. Because I do believe that the person who's like the head here in Manitoba is a Black person. So and to answer the question regarding why Black people don't, I think both Ms. Kamala and Ms. Elise had alluded to it. It's because we don't realize how we affect those boards and those organizations by having a presence. So I encourage people to, again, go for what you like, what you're passionate about, what you're knowledgeable about, and what you have time for. I think we talked maybe off camera about different boards, even in your city, for your province, for federal, whatever, that are open, and they're looking for people to have a more diverse board. So we have to take on that as a community to actually pursue that and look into what they're looking for, what different opportunities, because they've got boards on cities for sports, for education, libraries, music. They've got everything, and most of our community don't realize that. So we should be advocating as leaders to encourage our young people to look into those boards that have vacancies, that are looking for people to become members.
And one of our audience members says that we should also consider positions on advisory boards, not just as directors on a board, as another way to contribute our knowledge, skills, wisdom, etc. Michelle.
Thank you, Sarah. I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's important, though, to recognize there probably is more Black volunteerism than the statistics will indicate, because I think, number one, we volunteer in a lot of sort of informal, and I'm just using that term because I can't think of a better one, but situations that may not find their way into statistics, churches, and helping neighbors, and helping people get settled in the country, and all of these kinds of things that may not be counted. But there are some areas where I think it is an issue. One is boards. And, I have some friends who've started a new group called Board Diversity Network, aimed specifically at this very issue of filling that gap and helping minorities to get on boards, including boards that pay, not just volunteer board. But I think there's also economic factors at play, with people having multiple jobs, being tired at the end of the day, feeling traumatized at the end of the day. Sometimes if you're in a work situation where for 8 or 12 hours a day, you're the only Black person, you don't necessarily want to take your leisure time and spend it in an environment where you're again the only Black person, and this time not getting paid. But there's also the point that was made about networking, just not being aware of opportunities that are out there, or feeling that you're going to be welcome into those environments. So many issues, and I do think it's something that maybe we can have a continued dialogue about.
Yeah, that's a whole other fireside chat for
Yeah.
next season. And finally, Dr. Karras, and then we'll just wrap up.
Okay. I agree with Michelle. There's a lot of Black volunteerism happening that are not mainstream, and that are just small things happening in the community where people see needs and they're fulfilling those needs. And so, we shouldn't count that out. When the stats are being collected, they should attempt to collect that kind of information as well, because, some organizations are more informal than formal. So, Black people are out doing things and helping, but it's not recorded anywhere. And I do agree that there should be more of us on boards and commissions, but I think organizations where they really genuinely want to include Black people, that they should not look at just getting one person on a board. You need a critical mass, because I know from my employment, when you're the only one sitting at the table, your voice is not readily heard, and you can't scream because it's not professional. So you have to just repeat or do some underhanded thing with another person to get them to say what you want to say, and for it to be heard. And so when you're on a board, you want to have a critical mass, so that when an issue comes up, people don't say, oh, well, that's just an isolated thing or whatnot, that they can actually take it seriously and look at it, examine it. I know you want to wrap up, but I do want to say something about young people and volunteering.
Yes, please.
So if you don't mind.
No.
Ontario requires that students do 40 hours of volunteering in order to get their diploma, their high school diploma. And many times, students, especially Black students, they wait until they're in grade 12 and then they're running around trying to do the 40 hours, but also they might have part-time jobs and then they're trying to get their grades to get into post-secondary institutions and so on. So my suggestion is that parents and students consider volunteering from grade 9. You know, go to the local library, you can go to your school library, you could help out in the computer lab at school, you can help out in the cafeteria, you can go to the local elementary school and help the crossing guard, you can, you know, whatever you can do, you know, to rack up those hours from grade 9. So by the time you get to grade 12, you'll have more than 40 hours, and there's actually gains to be made with more than 40 hours, because if you're applying for scholarships or even to get into certain institutions, they look very favorably on students who have more than just the required 40 hours. So they can start early. They could volunteer before grade 9, but it wouldn't count. From grade 9 to 12, that's when they count the hours. And you should make sure, like if you're doing it within your religious institutions, get someone to fill out the form and record, you know, that you're volunteering. If you're singing in the choir or you're teaching, you know, something or whatnot, you know, all those things. And cultural organizations too, if you're helping out at Caravana and you're, you know, doing something else there, you know, all of those things you can start from grade 9. And so by the time you get the age when you can actually work to help with your family or whatnot, you might have just put in the hours that you needed before then. So
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, and I hope parents and tutors and guardians have taken note of that. One sentence to tell our audience, and this is to close, one sentence to tell us why volunteering is a meaningful endeavor. Michelle.
My goodness, I wanted to tell a whole story about that, but
One
in
sentence.
volunteering gives you experience. It gives you experience that can support you getting into post-secondary education, things that you could put on your resume, skills that you can apply in your job and support your professional development. So while it really isn't supposed to be about you, it's supposed to be helping others, there are benefits that you will realize as well.
Thank you. That's a whole paragraph, but it's a great paragraph. Nadia.
Oh, one sentence. Oh, that's hard.
Or one small paragraph.
It's a good feeling. We don't always do things that we're recognized and we're acknowledged for, but sometimes that internal gratitude and that internal satisfaction is a benefit. And you just never know. There's certain times that you volunteer for something that you're not expecting anything in return, and you get something in return, whether it be physical, emotional. Even if you help one person, it makes a huge difference in the world around us. So we have to remember that. And if we're helping each other, then we're more successful as a people. So.
Kamala Jean, one small paragraph.
It's a win-win situation, okay? You make friends, you enlarge your circle, you increase your knowledge, you find other people who can become allies in other things that you do. So win-win. The organizations, the community benefit, you learn and grow as well.
Fabulous. Elise.
We have one life. And spending it doing volunteering situations enriches me to a level that I can't even possibly explain. I say to my children, are you worth it? We are worth it. What we have to give is beneficial to the world, not just our family or community, to the world. And as an African Canadian historian, I feel that my time is best spent volunteering, not being paid, volunteering to give what is necessary to balance and heal this world.
Amen. Dr. Karras, how are you going to top that?
Not trying to, not at all.
Have to.
Personally, I tended to be really introverted and afraid of crowds and so on. And volunteering, especially with the Ontario Black History Society, when I suggested we have some programs before the AGM, I had to find myself introducing speakers and doing all of this as nervous and sweaty as possible as I was, but it brought me out of my shell and made me into a better public speaker, I think. And so as Kamala Jean said, win-win. You don't go in for that. You go to give what you want to give and to contribute to community, but you get something out of it. I just want to give you a little quote from Arthur Ashe, and this is for the young people. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And that's where you start.
Amen. I mean, that's a mic drop right there. There's nothing else for me to do than to thank our wonderful panelists, Kamala Jean Gopi, Nadia Thompson, all the way from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Elise Harding Davis from Windsor, Michelle James from Scarborough, and Dr. Karras Newton Thompson. I'm assuming you're in the GTA somewhere, right?
Rexdale.
Whoa, Rexdale. Shout out right there. Thank you so much, all of you, for all you have done and continue to do as volunteers.
What is it that we can say? What can we add to such a rich panel, such a wealth of experience and expertise? Thank you so much for giving up your time on this Sunday afternoon. It is the end of the second series, if we wish, of Fireside Chats. We've chatted, we've had conversations, we've had discussions, we've had arguments, we've converted many, we've sent many to fact check some of the information we've provided. But whatever we did over these past sessions, we hope, and the hope was that it would be stimulating, that it would create community buzz, that it will inspire, and that we will all be enriched as a result of the efforts of 100 ABC women and the expertise that they brought to the table. So thank you so much. I think that it would be impossible to go from one panel to the next, from one individual presenter to the next. But it is important that as we thank everyone as a group of panelists and as fireside chatters, that we were able to share, we were able to experience, and for me in particular, that I was able to see some of you and to hear some of you coming out of this COVID cloistered environment that we were in. So great to see and to hear. My grandsons were here and I had them listening. And one of them said, why am I going to volunteer when I could make money? So I think we have work to do with our young people. And I think we have, again, to have this conversation understood. I'm not too sure that he understood the nuance of volunteering. So we have to have a future conversation about why it's important to give time. And you've said it all, the networks, the partnerships, the collaborations, the collaborators, the allies, and everything that comes out of volunteering that enable us to be enriched and our lives to be enriched. So thank you. Thank you. And to my I'm looking for the right word. I could say those who collaborate in crime, but I think it's not a crime that you do. But thank you to Dr. Denise and Donna and all the networks that they brought together. It has been enriching. It has been a great experience. And as we close off chapter 2, I think many of you would say that we need to get into chapter 3, where these conversations will not only carry on, but survive. And we know that we have them surviving on YouTube. So those who had not participated today, we know that where they can find your remarks and your words. And every one of you looks so beautiful. I can't believe this. Great smiles and a great way to have you participate with us. Thank you, and thank you again.
Dr. Augustine, you have shown us black don't crack.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Well, how do you follow Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine? Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Jean, for your contributions today. I just gonna simply say a few thank yous, and because she said it all for us. It was just an extraordinary experience during season 2, extraordinary experience today. So I just want to say thank you. It's probably one of my easiest tasks. Many of our honorees have contributed their time every week to unselfishly bring their knowledge, experience, and passion to the 31 Fireside Chats this year. As I say to them, without your voices for those topical conversations, there would be no season 2. We cannot thank our sponsors enough. I will start off with TD, as they were platinum sponsors and offered many of their employees to lend their experiences, which you heard from Galila today. Thank you, TD. To CIBC, Harry Azelibi, I would like to say thank you very much for steering the ship for CIBC as a gold sponsor. You also heard from Dr. Claudette Knight about those who contributed. A special thanks to BIPOC Executive Search, CEO Jason Marie, Carpenters Union Chris Brown, and Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario ETFO Karen Brown. Thank you. You are super special, and we so appreciate your contribution, especially during COVID when funds were challenging to come by. I cannot thank our moderators enough. When one moderator was not available, another just stepped in. Many have said that the moderators are exceptional and perhaps should have a master class in moderating. You recall that comment, Sarah. The Planning and Communications Committee, Dr. Anna Jarvis, Jennifer Singh, and Doran Simmons-Wright. Then to the tech team, what can I say? Samba Savaye, Daniela Glasgow, Danica Wedderburn, Nicole Waldron, and the super tech team of Malcolm Edwards and Kitron. They have been unbelievable. To say a huge thank you and pay a special tribute to these amazing contributors, we have pulled together a video montage. Until then, see you in October season 3, where we will focus on topics like homelessness, violence, immigration, to name a few. By the way, if you have missed any of our episodes, remember that you can see them on our YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe though. Thank you for being with us during this time. Be safe and be kind. Our video montage is up next. Stay with us.
I think in terms of managing emotions, how does this mindfulness training complement or support their learning at school.
They're coming to, I'm born here in Canada, I'm Canadian, and where my ancestry is, where my education is coming from, it's coming from a cross reference of everything coming from Africa to Canada to the West Indies, the Caribbean, you know, Brazil, South America, everywhere. They know that everything starts from Africa.
It takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to not succumb to peer pressure and do the things that you know you need to do to get where you want to be.
You women are so fabulous. You just kept moving on. And I love the advice that you gave. And in the academy, there is this whole literature base called Motherhood and Mothering in the Academy, which definitely speaks to much of what all of you said.
Just to touch a bit on what's happening now with, you know, anti-racism and systemic racism within the corporation. When I think about going back to last year after the death of George Floyd, it was like a movement and a shift.
Thanks for 100 ABC women. Yes. You are doing so much for all of us. Amen. You're allowing us to share that power that Black women carry. You're giving us the glory. You're saying, Mother Africa, here we are. We are here helping to build this young nation. Canada is young. I tell people that I come from the Caribbean and I landed here and I thought, ooh, this is young, it needs help. Let's build, let's help build it.
I was speaking to someone the other day and I said, where are the babies? The seniors are outnumbering these young babies. So we have to really take care of our seniors and treat them like a baby.
Par où je vais commencer? J'ai besoin de me retrouver et je dirais que j'ai créé ma place comme ça, vraiment en continuant donc à m'engager sur les causes qui me tiennent à cœur, la justice sociale, l'élimination de la violence faite aux femmes.
And the more you want to share of yourself, it becomes addictive.
Because my story is the story of thousands of girls and women across the globe and the people who could not write. This hand is not my hand alone, it's the hand of thousands of people who have the same story. And
no, I ask questions. So my thing is we have to ask the questions, not in a judgmental way, but in a compassionate way.
I think if anything, this pandemic has blown the lid off of this problem of inequity, especially amongst Black and Indigenous people when it comes to healthcare.
Part of that bigger plan, expanding my purpose, where I then came to Canada, finished grad school, and literally the week after I finished grad school, I came to Hamilton after the 9/11 attacks, where they had burned the Hindu Samraj temple in Hamilton.
Important to recognize when you are at the crossroads and when you can do something about it. When you tend to lose ground and you are about, you're about to be defined by someone else. My response to that was, to tap into what I would call the best kept secrets. And one of the best kept secrets, I believe, is the secret of volunteering professionally.
And so believing in myself is something that carries through. We can think back to so many people who told us, oh, you can't do this, you can't go here, you can't afford this, or you can't, I was told all those things, right? So for me, the most important thing is just I believe in myself regardless of what people say.
And that traced through all the way through slavery, because there was a period of time, of course, when the Africans were doing all the building and they weren't learning new style, they were bringing their own style to what they were given and what they had to use. So even my mother was very into her history, and she's traced her family roots and everything in Canada.
There isn't really an appreciation for the difference between equity, diversity, and inclusion as concepts that are very different, have very different goals, and that interact with each other differently. The challenge, though, is racism can live among and beside and in those spaces between EDI. It is possible to have a strong EDI process and to also have racism operating.
Sharon, I'm gonna bump in here. I think the eating business has taken off, period. Okay? The next thing that has to happen is, the fitness business is gonna be skyrocketed once this COVID thing's over. But honey, the eating, the juicing, anything having to do with ingesting has taken off.
How we can
better be accountable and transparent and be clear on and having a good structure to be able to do the work that we want to do.
And the reason why I say that is she uttered 4 words to me and said that I was a woman of grace, wisdom and 2 other concepts. And from that's how the devotional book came about. I've always had a relationship with the Creator, and that is what carried me through.
But then I took the time to start to practice what I wanted to say. And then eventually it came out in my own voice. The first couple of times I did it with paper. The last, 2 or 3 times that I did it, because I was doing some tours across the country, I didn't need the paper anymore. It becomes more about your voice and who you are, and that will become natural to you over time.
What are your non-negotiables? The things that you do to deal with your stress. I know one of the things you said, Michelle, earlier on, is that in the morning, the first thing that you do, you have your prayer group. What are the other non-negotiables in your life that you do to maintain a good stress life? What was that word? Wait. It wasn't balance. It was integration.
The prayer group is one, and family. I'm there for my kids, 2 kids and 2 grandkids.
So that's one of the key parts. The other part is, how do you share that vulnerability? Why I share the story around how I grew up is because I was free to be myself. So when I walk into spaces, I'm just showing up as me. I don't care who is in the room. I don't care if they like me or don't like me. And I think the one part that I want to empower our women, Black women, is you're a queen. You are beautiful. And some of you need to know that you are in fact beautiful, and to walk in with poise and grace and share your story with truth and honesty.
Just that lady encouraged me and gave me that confidence to continue this journey, because I was just so frustrated and so fed up and just this is pointless. And then that lady just said her words to me, and it changed my whole trajectory.
You have to be your risk manager. For me, I'm a risk manager for Scotiabank, but I'm also a risk manager for myself. That's the first role that you should actually assume.
Writing a will may sound simple, and it's been made to look like so because of so many ways you can fill in this, fill in that, fill in the other. It can be a lot. It can become complex.
Sometimes they say the best defense is a good offense. And so knowing the environment that you are working within, whether you're changing employers, forming a new partnership, or moving departments, it's important to get a sense of the lay of the land and the culture that you're about to walk into.
We had a great session with our board about 3 years ago when it comes to EDI. And they endorsed that. And so recently, when we were rolling out some new training on health equity, we did it with the board of directors and the senior team first, before we gave it to everyone else.
Because we're still in the place of, and education is the best thing, that is our only savior and our only way out and our only liberation. So we force our kids in those spaces, but not tackling those spaces to be sure those spaces are keeping them well. And
although the labor movement has made many strides in so many different ways, we're still far behind. We're way behind the poll. To say that we're leading or we're being successful.
Today we're talking about leadership in the trades. So we have 3 dynamic women who are doing some fundamental things in their respective areas.
And yes, there's storage, but be cognizant of what is it that you're putting into storage. That's an opportunity for you to declutter further. So yes, you've sorted through the things you're keeping in their current environment, but let's do a sort and then a resort of what is actually going to go into storage.